The folded paper slid silently under her bedroom door, catching the evening light. Her father froze, his hand hovering above it as though the paper itself carried heat. Before we dive into the story, tell us where you're watching from. He hesitated. What could be written inside that would make his chest feel so tight? A child's words can be simple, but sometimes they land heavier than anything else in a home. His fear was not of the paper itself, but of what it might reveal. Hurt, distrust, or something he had overlooked. The house around him stayed quiet, waiting. This was a house where silence had become its own kind of language. Not tense or angry, just steady. Like background air everyone had learned to breathe. The father stepped into that quiet the same way he did every night, a stack of envelopes in one hand, his mind already on dinner. Down the hall, his daughter's door stayed closed. Her space was private, almost sealed, yet something waited at the edge of it. A square of paper, folded and sharp against the dark floorboards, cut through the ordinary scene. He slowed when he saw it. Nothing belonged there. No shoes, no toys, no stray clothing. Only the squared white shape placed so carefully it had to be noticed. He bent toward it, studying how the creases were neat, the edges sharp. A thought flickered. Sometimes a written note carried what a child could not say aloud. He let his shadow fall across it before picking it up. The sound of the fold leaving the wood seemed louder than it should, a single dry rustle rising inside the still air. His fingers trembled as they closed around it. He noticed the tremor, slight but undeniable, and knew this was not a drawing, not a homework reminder. It felt different. It was deliberate. The light above him glowed softly, outlining the closed door nearby. From the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed, steady and unbothered, the one familiar rhythm in a house that had just shifted. He straightened, the folded paper pressed between his palm and thumb, its weight far heavier than its size allowed. For a long second, he simply stood there, listening. He thought of all the evenings where this silence had meant nothing, where quiet was just the easy absence of words. Tonight it meant something else. Tonight it asked him to carry more than he'd expected. He turned from the hallway, careful with each step. The note was now a kind of secret pact between them, offered without eye contact or speech. Where he carried it next would decide how he faced what waited inside. And so he moved toward the one place in the house that belonged only to him. He entered the study with the folded note still in his hand, its small weight pressing into his palm. The door shut with a soft click, sealing off the rest of the house. On the desk, he set it down precisely in the center of the wood, as if that placement alone might steady him. For several moments, he didn't move closer, only watched it, his stillness carrying more tension than pacing would have. The paper held sharp creases, folded and refolded with care. Each line in its surface spoke of hesitation and resolve layered over one another. He knew this was no casual scrawl. Something important waited inside. His mind began to circle possibilities. Had something happened at school? Something too heavy for her to bring out in words? Or was she hiding a mistake at home? A broken object? Maybe a truth she thought too fragile for his reaction. The not knowing weighed more than either answer might have, because in this moment, both felt equally possible. The passing light through the window shifted to orange, sharpening every edge in the quiet room. Time seemed to slow, pulling his attention only to what sat before him. It felt at once terrible and sacred to him, this pause before opening, as though the moment itself deserved its own silence. He lowered himself into the chair carefully, the sound of leather creasing loud in the hush. His hands rested on either side of the note, close but unwilling to touch, the way someone might stand near a closed door, knowing that once it opens, there will be no going back. A steady breath left him, then another. At last, his fingers moved, brushing the edges with a deliberate gentleness. He lifted the paper as if it might bruise, the crinkle of folds striking the air like a small confession. One crease gave way, then another, until the folds surrendered and the writing revealed itself. His eyes caught on the pencil lines at the top. His shoulders tightened, and his breath hitched without meaning to. What appeared on the page was about to reshape the air in the room, word by word, as he began to read. The words appeared in soft pencil, some shaped with care, others uneven, as though pressed out through a rush of feeling. His eyes traced them slowly, line by line, a pause at the top, a repeated word, underlined once. This could be read aloud in the voiceover, letting viewers sit with the echo before the next line appears. His breath shortened as he went further, his chest rising in shallow pulls that marked each sentence. She had written about the shadows at night, how they seemed to stretch along her walls when the house grew quiet, how ordinary sounds from the hallway became strange and unwelcome in the dark. It was a fear he hadn't known she carried, the kind strong enough to keep her awake when her body longed for rest. His shoulders sank. One hand pressed firm against the edge of the desk, steadying him, while the other held the note as lightly as though it might tear. He realized then how small things often meant more to her than he had imagined. To him, a light left on at night was nothing. To her, it was a shield against a world that sometimes felt bigger than she could face. The handwriting itself told its own story. Light strokes where she hesitated, dark lines where she'd pressed harder, as if force alone could make him understand. A smudge where her hand had lingered too long. Warmth against the page. He reread the same phrase twice, lips moving as if to test its sound. She hadn't asked for much. Not for the shadows to go away entirely, just for someone to check the closet again. Just for a little hallway light. The simplicity of it tightened his throat more than any plea for something grand. By the final words, he lowered himself fully into the chair, the note cradled in both hands. The room itself seemed altered. Not transformed, but weighted differently. Even the familiar lamp and family photo felt rearranged by what she had trusted him with. For a long beat, the study stayed hushed around him. Then, from downstairs, came the faint sounds of life carrying on. Soon, he would have to step back into it. When he stepped out of the study, the weight of the note still shaped his expression. His wife closed her book slowly, her eyes following him with quiet concern. Something was different, and though she didn't know why, she read the change in the way his shoulders carried the room. He moved through the evening as if on autopilot, setting the table, aligning silverware with careful precision. His body kept the rhythm of routine while his thoughts stayed elsewhere. His gaze drifted down the hallway more than once, toward the closed door that hadn't opened. From behind that door, his daughter pressed her ear to the quiet. She caught the scrape of chairs, the clink of dishes, the faint shuffle of her father moving about the kitchen. Each sound was a message she tried to decode, though none gave away what he had felt when his eyes met her words. The house kept up its everyday soundtrack, knives on plates, voices low around the television, the dog scratching impatiently at the back door. Yet in the spaces between, there was something stretched tight. His wife noticed it most in his stillness at dinner, how he didn't ask his usual questions. Her eyes lingered on him, searching for an answer he wasn't ready to share. A moment passed across the table when their gazes locked. She raised her brows, an unspoken ask. His almost imperceptible shake of the head told her enough. Not here, not now. It was the shorthand couple's reach after years together, whole pages of dialogue contained in silence. The children carried on with dessert. Ice cream melting in steady spoons, oblivious to the quiet signal flashing across the table. In that pause, let me ask you. If this part resonates with you, leave a comment. It helps others feel seen. As the meal wound down, the tension that had threaded through the evening did not ease. Instead, it settled deeper, wrapping itself into the air until everyone sensed something important had passed between doors, though no one named it aloud. In the hush that followed, only one question lingered unspoken. What was she hearing from the other side of the wall? From her room that night, the daughter stayed alert, every part of her tuned to the sounds drifting through the house. She sat upright on the edge of her bed, straining to catch meaning in the footsteps, the low murmur of voices, the clink of plates beyond her door. Each noise was measured, tested against her worry, though none answered what she longed to know. She busied herself to blunt the waiting. Books shifted slightly on their shelves, sweaters folded again, though already neat. Her small hands kept moving, but her thoughts circled back to the note on the other side of the wall. To her, the waiting felt endless. Doubt slipped in, heavier than the quiet around her. Maybe she had been foolish to write about shadows. Maybe a note was the wrong way to speak. She pressed her palms into the bedspread, easing the restless creak of the mattress with every shift, searching for some pocket of comfort. Then it came. the sound she both dreaded and needed. Her father's steps slowed outside her door, the wood beneath him sighing softly. She froze, breath caught, eyes fixed on the handle that never turned. For a heartbeat, stillness. Then his weight shifted, and the steps carried past. Down the hallway. Away. Insert a pause here. 3 seconds of silence or a soft ambient sound cue to let the listener feel the space she felt. Relief pressed into her because there would be no awkward words right now. But it tangled with sharper worry. What did his silence mean? Her arms folded around her knees, chin tucked down, the vigil growing heavier with each sound that reminded her he was near but not entering. The evening moved on. The television murmured. A dog barked softly at the back door. The clock downstairs marked another hour. None of it calmed her. Each familiar sound felt stretched thin, weighted with meaning she could not name. She sat that way, eyes trained on her closed door, as though the wood itself might break into answer. Everything depended on what he would do next, though she could not yet see where he had gone, or how he was choosing to carry her words. In the kitchen, long after the others had gone quiet, he spread the note across the counter once more. The dim light above buzzed faintly, casting a soft circle over the paper. His palm smoothed it flat. The shock that had struck him earlier had given way to something heavier, a quieter reckoning with what these words were really asking of him. How much had he overlooked in her world? How many chances to notice had slipped past him in ordinary moments? Memories rose uninvited. The way her hugs at bedtime had lasted those few extra counts. Her sudden preference for leaving the door ajar with a book in her lap. The repeated requests to check windows before she could fall asleep. At the time, they had felt like small quirks, easy to brush aside. Now, laid against her note, they carried weight he had failed to see. He realized those small gestures had been asking for help. The paper glowed faintly under the kitchen light, sitting beside his cooling coffee. To him, it was more than a sheet torn from a notebook. It was her first attempt to bridge the space between them, done in the only form she could manage. If she had chosen paper, he decided, then so would he. His answer would mirror hers, a response in kind, one folded page to meet another. He pulled open a drawer and drew out a pen, its barrel cool in his hand. A fresh sheet waited under his palm, brighter than the worn counter it rested on. For a long moment, he only stared at the empty lines. Then silence stretched further when the refrigerator clicked off, leaving the kitchen hushed, as if waiting for his choice. The pen began to move. A steady scratch marked the page, each letter slower than his usual hand. He wrote of how proud he was of her courage. He promised hall lights could stay on, closets could be checked twice together. He chose words that admitted her fear without brushing it aside. Words simple enough to hold, but honest enough to matter. By the time he set the pen down, the page carried what his voice could not. He folded it with care, pressing each crease as she had, and placed it quietly at his side, ready for where it needed to go when the house woke again. By the next morning, a reply waited quietly on the other side of her door. Pale light stretched across her floorboards as she stirred, and there it was, the soft rectangle that hadn't been there when she drifted off to sleep. She knew at once what it meant. He had answered her note in the same language she had chosen. She slid from bed slowly, bare feet brushing the rug, and picked it up. The paper felt firm in her hands, the creases pressed flat and deliberate. His handwriting looked different from hers, measured, with even spaces, as if he had taken more time than usual with each word. He hoped a note would reach her in a different way than words spoken at the door ever could. She unfolded it with care. Inside were more lines than she'd expected, each sentence carrying a quiet weight. He thanked her for trusting him with her fear. He admitted it mattered, even if it seemed small from the outside. And rather than rushing to fix it, he chose to sit beside her feelings in ink. His words opened the subject instead of closing it. Still, he offered simple promises she could hold on to. He would check the closet again at night. A hallway light could glow softly, one meant for sleep rather than harsh brightness. Her door could stay ajar just wide enough for the house's comfort to travel through. These were straightforward things, but together they formed small bridges between her world and his. She read the note twice, lips shaping the sentences as though speaking them to herself. Then she pressed the page to her chest until her shoulders eased and the tightness in her stomach began to lift. The house carried its morning rhythms around her, muffled movement from her parents' room, the low hum from the kitchen, but her focus was here, on this folded sheet in her hands. After a long moment, she folded it again neatly and slid it into the top drawer of her desk. Safe. Ready to be read again when doubt returned. It wasn't just her father's handwriting she tucked away, but a quiet assurance that her voice had been heard. Soon, they would face each other in daylight. They met at the breakfast table with something unspoken between them. The father stood by the counter pouring orange juice while his daughter slid quietly into her chair. Those first moments moved carefully, both aware of the night's exchange, but unsure how to bring it into spoken air. The notes had built a new layer of understanding, and now the challenge was how to live inside it. He poured her cereal with deliberate care. The gesture said more than a speech. He measured the portion she preferred, set the bowl in front of her with both hands, and waited a beat before stepping back. She watched him from under her lashes, reading his movements as if they carried secret words of their own. The note remained unmentioned, yet alive between them, shaping the silence. Her spoon circled slowly through milk, each soft clink stretching the moment. He busied himself with the coffee pot, the sound of water dripping into glass, filling the gaps that neither wanted to crowd with quick talk. The morning sun slid across the table, laying a glow over the ordinary set of bowls, cups, and silverware. That light caught the rhythm of their shared pause, the quiet way they adjusted to being a little different with each other. When they both reached for the milk at the same time, their hands touched near the sugar bowl. The contact lingered just long enough for her to look up, brushing her bangs aside to meet his eyes. He held her gaze with a warm smile, wide enough to soften the corners of his face. She answered with a small one of her own, hesitant at first, then steady. The kitchen took on a lighter feel, not from any change in furniture or routine, but from the breath lifting between them. No direct words were exchanged, but the look they shared carried the completion of what the notes had begun. Silence became part of their answer. The morning continued, with toast popping, coffee poured, and the pet nudging at her leg under the table. Beneath it all, a new closeness rested quietly, reminding them both that sometimes whole truths could fit on a folded page. At the end of it all, what stayed wasn't the paper, but the choice to listen in a new way. A folded note became the doorway to trust, and that trust grew in the quiet hours that followed. If the story resonated, tell us how you handled a similar talk in the comments. Your words may help someone else feel less alone. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe. Thank you for being here and for sharing a few minutes of reflection with us.